Okay? Now, I want us to explore how that's possible, because it doesn't, at first glance, it doesn't seem to make sense, right? How is it possible for 435 members, apparently, if we believe the perceptions of the constituents that they represent, how is it possible for 435 individuals to be doing such a great job, but for the institution as a whole to be doing such a sucky job? How is that possible? It's almost like, if you like sports metaphors, and who doesn't like sports metaphors, right? It's almost like, fielding a team of 9 all-star baseball players who are the best at their positions, right? Who make these spectacular plays and hit for average and hit for power. We're not in baseball season. Maybe I shouldn't be using a baseball. It's never a bad time for a baseball metaphor, right? So you have 9 players who are the best defensive players at their positions. They hit for power. They hit for average. They have, whatever it takes to be a great baseball player, but they can't win games. That doesn't really seem like that could be possible, does it? Oh, well, maybe baseball metaphor just doesn't work here. Okay. It does seem strange, though, that you would have a situation where, in the perception of their constituents, the individuals are doing such a great job, but the institution is doing such a poor job. Now, this is not a new observation that I'm drawing your attention to. In fact, for many, many years, political scientists have written about this phenomenon. It really goes back to the early 1970s when a political scientist by the name of Richard Fenno, there you can see Professor Fenno at the University of Rochester, as a young political scientist and a scholar on the United States Congress who's written numerous books on the United States Congress. But one of his early books, he was really the first to identify this paradox, or this phenomenon, where people love their individual representative, they love their individual senator, but they hate Congress as an institution. And so it has consequently come to be referred to by many of my colleagues as Fenno's dilemma, or sometimes Fenno's paradox. I prefer Fenno's dilemma, but so if you were to do a Google search on Fenno's paradox, you would probably come up with the same thing. Okay? So Fenno's dilemma, or Fenno's paradox, is the phenomenon that denotes the tendency of constituents. Constituents are the people who are represented, right? So all of you out there at Rice High School, you are the constituents. You are 4 of the constituents of, do you remember your representative's name?
Michael McCall.
Mike McCall, good. And out here at Sugarland, you are 10 of the constituents of Pete Olson, right? And out there at Louise High School, Brandon, you are a constituent of, do you remember?
Farenthold.
Good. Okay. Blake Farenthold. So, how is that possible? Well, I want you to, I'm going to try to explain this by talking about a couple of the, what is that doing? Good heavens. I forgot that weirdness was in there. I want to talk about this in terms of the 2 principal functions of Congress. I had an interesting experience a number of years ago. Before I came to Wharton County Junior College, I was for many years on the faculty at Temple College. How many of you know where Temple, Texas is? Who knows where Temple, Texas is? Tori knows where Temple, Texas is. Tori, have you had the great pleasure of spending much time in that part of the state?
More like drove right through it, but...
Yeah, it's not hard to do. It's highly advisable just to drive right through it. But tell everybody where Temple, Texas is.
The middle of nowhere.
Well, I don't know if I'd go that far. It's actually a growing and pretty large metropolitan area, but if you're from the Houston area, it may seem like the middle of nowhere, I guess. It is in the I-35 corridor. It's between, it's about an hour north of Austin, okay? Between Austin and Waco. And there's actually quite a few people live in that part of the state, but there's a media market, okay? You know how we have like local news stations like 13 Eyewitness News and 11 Cares for Houston and Channel 2 Does It For You or whatever their ridiculous local slogans are. They have these local news stations in the Central Texas market as well. And I was sitting in my office one day at Temple College and the phone rang. We used to have these things called landlines. And occasionally they would ring and there would be somebody, you'd pick it up and say hello and there would be somebody on the other end. Right? And this particular day, there was a woman who identified herself as a reporter at one of the local news stations. And she wanted to know if she could come by and talk with me for a while about the upcoming election. We're about a week in front of congressional elections that year. And I said, well, okay, but why do you want to talk to me? I wondered why she wanted to talk to me. I don't have any particular expertise in electoral politics. I mean, I know some things about electoral politics, but it wasn't one of my fields of expertise when I was doing research and a graduate student and so on. So I just figured that maybe there was nobody available at Baylor University to talk to her. So I said, sure, come on by. And she came a couple of hours later. She shows up at my door, and her photographer is with her, and they set up a camera and all that sort of stuff. And she has a lot of stuff she wants to talk about. She came in with a stack of papers, right, and all this data that she wanted to talk about, relative to the upcoming election. And eventually she got to this point that I'm talking with you about today. She said, look at this, these public opinion polls consistently over many, many years show that most Americans don't like Congress. They think Congress stinks, but they love their individual representatives and senators. I said, yeah, we political scientist types call that Fenno's dilemma. She said, oh, Fenno's dilemma, that's really good. And then she said, well, what do you think? And I said, what do you mean, what do I think? And she said, do you think Congress does a good job? And I gave her, the patented political scientist response to that, which is, it depends. It depends. And she looked puzzled, and I said, well, it depends on what you think the job of Congress is. And I tried to give her a fairly, decent explanation of what I meant by that, and she just kind of looked at me with a blank stare, and I guess she didn't like what she heard very much because I never saw any of it on the TV. But I'll try to give you the quick summary of what I told her.